So, thank you, everyone. I am so excited to share with you a good friend of mine who I've known since 2017. And he quickly became one of my deepest friends. And I'd have to think it's likely a lot to do with who he is as a person and also the things that he's navigated in his own life. And I asked, who is Mike Carr? And he's a man of so many talents. So I wanted him to speak about his story, his life lessons, and what he's up to today. So, Mike, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me on. Um, I'm just, I guess, a regular guy. Didn't see myself going to college, and the military kind of piqued my interest. So after school, I joined the Marine Corps, and that took me on a bunch of different roads for 20 some years, 27 years. Uh, had my had my kids, which are mean everything to me. And then now I'm retired and trying to help other vets.
And so, thank you for your service and the depth of the way that you live. I'm wondering how much of that have you gained from your experiences in the military?
Probably a good amount, I would say. I mean, some of it, I guess, is just some kind of internal code of my own or whatever, and some of it's just the military as well, and maybe just how my mind works. I'm more of a mathematician, if you will. Not that I'm a math expert, but it's 1 plus 2 is always going to equal 3. But ask me to do some poetry, probably not going to get anything good. I guess for me, I just was looking for the adventure. When I was in 8th grade, so I went through Catholic school for kindergarten through 9th grade, but one school was kindergarten through 8th grade. And my quote for that yearbook was, life, it's not just a job, it's an adventure. So I guess that was kind of just the preface of my kind of like a life philosophy: go out and just do exciting and fun things. And I definitely got to do that over my career in the Marine Corps. I got to do a wide variety. I mean, I was just on, and it was Facebook the other day, and somebody reminded me of something that we did 33 years ago. So in my first helicopter ride and my first helicopter crash. So it's just a wide, crazy variety of things.
Yeah, and I'm laughing a little bit because I know you as not an ordinary person. And how you introduce yourself as, I'm just an ordinary person and I was in a helicopter crash and like I did this and I did that. And, of course, to me, like, well, that doesn't sound so ordinary.
I mean, I've gotten to do a variety of things. I've been really blessed in my career over those 27 years to just continually doing like, okay, this thing is fun, and then what's the next higher level thing that I can do that's also kind of fun and kind of cool. So I started out in a rifle company, and on my first deployment, we were like minutes away from flying in to rescue a colonel in Lebanon. To my next deployment, we went to northern Iraq, and then from there I ended up going to a sniper platoon. Kind of the next step up, and from there I went to an anti-terrorist unit. Went to like Mogadishu. That was just a totally crazy thing. But it's always kind of led like that. Like, oh, what's the next, in my mind, fun thing? What I think was fun, but other people like jumping out of an airplane or jumping out of a helicopter. That's fun. Well, to me, yes, that's fun. And I just kind of picked that throughout my career. Like, what's the next fun thing that I want to do, or that I have the ability to do. And I've always gotten to do that. Like jumping out of a helicopter into the ocean to swim in. That was kind of cool. And like I said, jumping out of airplanes, going on patrols in the jungles of Panama. That was fun. I got stung by an Africanized killer bee, next to my eye a bunch of times, and I was high on codeine and walking through the jungles of Panama for a little while. That's something that you probably don't hear a whole lot of, and and just I have such a wide variety of um, things that I've gotten to do. It's just kind of hard to to narrow down into one or two things or a couple things.
The depth of life that you've brought into my own life, like the type of friendship that you've helped to cultivate within the short period that I've known you is, they're so meaningful. And I think that's why it was like a quick person I want to share with the world. And again, it's just to point out, like, we hear these small sparks of your story, and then to hear you also say, I'm just an ordinary person. And from what I know about you as well, it's like stepping in and devoting more time and experience to the role with your children now. It's a very high priority. Can you share a little bit more about some experiences that you have as a father?
Sure. So my son was born. I was there for that. I was there in the room. Watched him being born. We didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. Um, and I was sitting in the room, and my wife at the time was like in front of me, and the doctor's over here to the one side, and the head's crowned. It comes out, and before the doctor could even say something, I was like, "It's a boy!"
Hmm.
So that was really exciting. And the tough part of that was 2 weeks later, I went away on a 6 month deployment. So that was the ups and the downs. I think some of the stuff that I do now is trying to make up for the time that I lost while doing these fun adventurous things while I was in the service. And so that was one of the hardest days was I did that deployment with when Michael was born, came back, and then I was home doing different jobs for like 5 years. And Laura was born, during that time. And one of the hardest things was saying goodbye to her when she was like 3. And all she knew was like, okay, good night, daddy. In her mind, she's going to see me in the morning. And in my mind, I'm going to see you. It was supposed to be 3 months, turned into 8 months later was when I came back. So that was one of the harder things for me. And I think that helped, you know, missing those times is what, kind of drives me now to try to be there as much as I can for my kids. As well as a sense of when we decided to have kids, that in my mind, that's a lifelong commitment. I see other military members that, have kids, get divorced, meet a new man or woman, and then their kids become the priority, and your own kids don't, because they're with their mother or with their father or whatever. And that was, it, never me. And in my mind, that was always the priority. Even when I started, dating some people, and I was like, hey, just my kids are the priority. And like, oh yeah, we understand. Until it came time to, oh, I want you to go out to dinner with me to do this. Well, Michael or Laura's got this thing going on. I'm going to that. And then they'd get mad. I was like, I told you at the beginning that they had the priority. I think they were just thinking that was just me saying some words and not actually going to follow through with that. So,
Yeah, and that's certainly been something very palpable. I think when I think of you, like, that stands out to me as something that you're very devoted to providing. So I just wanted to pause to say, like, especially from someone that values that, I certainly want to honor that as such a huge shared value, and to see you really living it is very endearing. And is there
thank you.
Yeah, and so is there any tips, when people are trying to pressure you, do you have any tips for people to try to help navigate to, one, recognize their own priorities, but also when they're in new relationships and they're feeling that pressure and that kind of discord between values, how to navigate that conversation?
Uh, I don't know, man. It's tough. I think you have to have those values to start with. If it's and it really gets the conviction as well to want to do that. Again, I've seen other guys that what's currently here in front of me now is more important than what I did, making that child, 6 years ago or whatever it is. Um, and then, like I said, just be honest. When I started dating, I was honest. Like, hey, my kids are the priority. It is what it is. Um, but just, like I said, be honest and upfront with people, and hopefully, I guess what I've learned is there's not a lot of people that are honest and open and upfront with people, and they're like, oh wow, you were serious about this or that, or you know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's so interesting too because I even for dating sites, like I always used to think if I'm gonna be on a dating site, I better put myself in athletic gear. And whenever
Mm,
like you accept dates, it's like, and it should be hiking and wear regular athletic clothes and what you feel comfortable with. Because if a person only likes us when we are dressed up in a way that I mean, if people like to dress up and that's normal and they do that and that's part of something that they do regularly, that's one thing. But for me, who doesn't
yeah.
dress up, I'm like, I don't want someone to like me when they see me this way, when the reality is this. And I think to your point of, especially with our media now, that people can use filters or they can
Mhm.
select pieces of their life that they want people to see and they can hide the rest. And again, I think that is speaks very loudly to how quickly our friendship was able to be formed just because of how authentic and real and honest that you are.
Mhm. Yeah. I was thinking about something you were talking about a minute ago. Um, me and Laura went out to dinner to a local Japanese place, and her old counselor from middle school and her husband and the lady's daughter were there. And in the conversation, the guy Mark's like, hey, Laura, what's going to happen when your dad's not here? She's like, nope, my dad's Superman. He's going to be here forever.
Hmm. Yeah,
Just that's that being her mindset from, I guess, what I've laid, the groundwork I've laid, and
I love that. And is there any advice for anyone that might be thinking about getting? I know when people ask me if what my recommendations for the military would be, I'm like, well, one, don't think about it just for the money, the cost savings.
Mhm.
This is you are sacrificing your life. And also, like our journey with the military will be different. One about what people do, and also when they join. But are there
Mhm.
any recommendations or advice that you typically give to people that are considering joining the military?
Uh, I think some of it is what do you want to do? One, what do you want to get out of it? Two, and then going um, from what they want to do or what they want to do, kind of gear them, guide them towards a different service. Like different services have different missions.
Mhm.
The Marine Corps' mission is different than the Air Force's mission. So Marine Corps boot camp is different than the Air Force boot camp because they're trying to get a different product out. They need to have, Marine Corps is looking for a guy or a gal that's getting ready to, to go into the fight, potentially on the front lines where you know, instant obedience to orders is going to save your life. Hey, get down now. Well, what do you mean I got to get down? Why do I got to get down? And 8,000 questions is going to happen, or help you in the middle of a firefight. Get down. I'm trying to, in that I'm trying to save your life. Whereas, you know, in the Air Force, you have time to potentially explain that. Like, hey, go do this. Well, why? Because we're going to do this, that, and the other. Oh, okay. And then they go, and then they continue on. I mean, even when I was in the Marine Corps, if I could explain why we're doing something, I would try to, because then I'd get a better product at the end. But they also knew that when I came in and changed my tone of voice and said, hey, gave them an order, it's like, oh, okay, I don't have time to ask why. Let's just get this done, and then we can figure out from there. So that being said, and same thing with like my son going in the Navy. I thought that was a better fit for him and his personality than like, well, why didn't you have him join the Marine Corps? I think the Navy was a better fit for him. So I guess that's part of knowing who you're talking to, their personality and what would work better for them.
Yeah, and you sound like such a great mentor, and I'm just wondering who else, because we hear from recruiters, and the recruiter that I had in the Air Force, I had multiple different ones, so it took me a while to navigate whether I was going to join and what that would look like. And I was always asking, tell me the worst things I have to put up with. Not what am I going to get my stipend, not all the bonuses. What is the
Hmm.
reality of my life? Because you just sometimes, if people want to sell it to you versus what I'm hearing for you is you genuinely care about that person's life and what would be best for them. You have in your mind some, I would love to send everybody to you, but I know that's not possible for you to help everybody navigate. But what type of resources should people look into to get that honest feedback?
I mean, they can go to, talk to a veteran, especially people that served in the global war on terror. They'll get the real deal view of what they can expect. You know, Vice is talking to like my grandfather as an example. His time in service is way different than than my time. So I would try to maybe talk to a vet locally that has served in one of those branches. You can either go to the VFW or the American Legion, and try to talk to a veteran there, or even if you see him out wearing a hat, you're like, hey, go up and just talk to him and ask and see. Yeah, and some might be more jaded, and that's why me personally, that's why I try to get the right fit, with somebody, because I don't want you're given 40 years of your life or more, or potentially up to your life. Um, in your service. So I wanted to be the best fit, for you. So when you get out, it's a positive experience. Even if whether you do 4 years or 24 years, it's a positive. You can look back on it and it's a positive experience. Even when I was still in, whether I was still listed or when I became a chief warrant officer, the I'd hear a guy, hey, I'm getting out. Okay, cool. What's your plan?
Hmm.
Whereas some like EH would be like, you're getting out, you need to stay in the court. And then they would just push them off to the side. I was like, not everybody can stay and do 20 years. There's nothing wrong with doing 4 years, especially now. At that point, we were in heavy combat. They came in knowing they're going to war. They did 2 or 3 combat tours, and now they're moving on. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want to make sure that they're getting out and they have a plan, not I'm going to my buddy's dad's best friends, cousins, sisters, aunt who's going to get me a job. And that's the only plan they have. Like, did you talk to them? Did they know you're coming? Just have a solid plan when you get out. So I guess that's part of the caring about them over, caring them as an individual, not as just a number. Oh, I got to get so many to be in my unit, or I have to get so many in my certain, at each month, like for the recruit, I have to get so many in, which they do, but trying to get that right fit, in my mind, is important because I've seen other guys that they made it through boot camp, but they were not. I don't know. They weren't the swiftest. There was this one kid that I was back early after that 8 month long deployment after Michael was born, um, or no, after I left for Laura, um, and came back, and he was painting on the walls. He was like 5 or 6 rungs up in a ladder painting, and I was like, "Hey!" And I said his name, and he turned to come to me and walked right off the ladder and fell and hit his head because he couldn't, put. I'm on a ladder painting. I need to come down and then come over and talk to the gunny. It was just like okay. And in the end, I think he ended up getting kicked out of the Marine Corps. But I was one of those ones like, hey, come on, recruiters, man. I know it's the end of the month and you got to get somebody in, but come on now. We got to do a little bit better of a job than that.
Yeah, and I saw the wide spectrum because I know for me, the military, that transitional point, whether in, we're adapting while in, or we're navigating that transition out.
Hmm.
Like those periods of time to have a solid mentor and to realize that it's different. This is no longer civilian
Yeah,
life. Can we talk about those steps and like your advice? And I'd love to share with you like some things that I wish that I would have done differently and thought differently that
sure.
could have been helpful. So let's start in the beginning. And as you're entering the military, what things were going on for you? in terms of like how are you helping to prepare?
Oh shoot, I think when I enlisted, so everybody has these horror stories about their recruiters. I'm still friends on Facebook with my recruiter. My mom, you know, sends him messages, and they, still, you know, do stuff back and forth. He was a great guy. I mean, I knew what I wanted. I came in, I was like, I want to be, I want to go infantry, and I want to do this. And he's like, Roger that. Um, so that part was great. The other recruiter that was in the office was an infantry guy in the reserves, um, and he gave me his 782 gear. So it's like the harness with the belt. I had two canteens and a butt pack on, and I was doing some. I didn't think it was crazy. Other people thought it might have been crazy. So my workout routine was on Mondays. I'd run 10 was it 10.4 or 10.8? Yeah, I think it was 10.8 on Mondays. Tuesdays I'd run 5.4. Wednesdays I'd do 3 miles for like the PFT. I'd take Thursday off, and then Friday I was putting on that 782 gear and running around my neighborhood, which was exactly like 1 mile. And then once I got done that mile, I went to my backyard, and I had one of those gym ropes that have the thick, 1 inch or a couple inch, gym ropes, and I climb up that like 2 stories. I do pull ups and I climb down, then I do another lap. So by the time I got to boot camp, I was in really good shape, and I think I got out of shape,
Mm-hmm.
somewhat to a certain extent from that to going to boot camp, because we wasn't working out as much. It was different, and so that's kind of how I prepared. I remember one thing that sticks out in my mind. My uncle Charlie was a Korean War vet. Was driving home one day, and it was downpouring, probably about 50 degrees out. He was at the golf course, and he's like, "Who?" He was with somebody else. And he's smoking a cigar. He's like, "Man, who is that idiot running?" "Oh shoot, that's my nephew." And he just
Well,
keeps on driving.
the
It's
real reason why we're friends is showing up right now, right? We're both a little bit crazy when it comes to the adventures we go on through our athletics. But that's
yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, who is that person with? So tell me about this gear. I'm not familiar with the gear that you have on at this point.
So it's just like a, a web harness belt that would go around, and you could clip different stuff onto it. So think of like Vietnam era, like you think of like the Vietnam War guys where they had that little harness. We called it an H harness. So it came up over and a little H in the back, and then came down and connected to the web. Put your canteens, your magazine pouches, and all your other stuff on that. So it was like a 10 or 15. I had a big bag of rocks that I put in the butt pack to add the weight, plus the water in the canteens just to add the weight. And again, that was only on the Fridays, and but,
And we can
again,
compare it to like, so I was doing marathons, right? And it certainly helped with
mm-hmm,
the endurance aspect. But I had started my life as a shot putter and explosive sports type of person. By the time I was joining the military, I was more into the endurance running. So I got a trainer. And I agree with you that
mm-hmm,
reduced the element of stress that I was experiencing in officer training. But I want to pause to say, like, compare contrast. You were going to Marines, right? At this time, you were
mm-hmm,
full Marine, right? And I was going into
yeah,
Air Force. So as we're, allowing people to think about what might be a good fit for them, I go into officer training for the Air Force, and like you said, start to get a little bit out of shape because it was in the time it was in the summer, and so we had a lot of black flag, couldn't go out, couldn't
mm-hmm,
really do the training, and I was a dentist. You are in infantry. You're going, when you're going infantry, and I was going into
yeah,
dentistry. And so there are risks of deploying in dentistry, but your deployments are different than frontline. So
mm-hmm,
just to try to get people in perspective, like when they're thinking about joining the military, to your point, military is not military. It's not military. The military, what it is right now, wasn't the military that it was or that it will be. So always navigating, and also what you were saying, about the things that we sacrifice when it comes to a lot of, the deployments or the things that we lose some autonomy, and to reflect back is just always something I appreciate hearing, because when we're joining at our younger ages before our brains are fully developed and our
Hmm.
priorities might be different, it sounds really great. And we're like, I'll figure it out, right? We do, and we learn a lot. But then comes into the point where we might be in the military. And now we've decided, I thought I was going to be a lifetime military, like I did. I thought I'd be in the military for at least 20 years, and you were 27.
Hmm.
But so mine was cut short because I was going into oral maxillofacial surgery, and that sleep deprivation caused me to develop severe depression. And you met me when I was coping with anorexia,
Yeah.
and so that was not compatible. And I had that conflict in my mind of, I committed to this, and now it looks like I'm going to have to reconsider and pivot. So it sounds like you've had these
Hmm.
discussions with people. And what kind of advice do you usually give to people with having those internal conflicts?
So I'll give you an example. I was at, I think I was the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion gunner, and I was dealing with some Marines that I knew from Infantry Training Battalion. And this guy had gone through, and he, PT stud, great Marine, went and did the Marine Special Operations Command's assessment and selection. He did the course. He came out as like the number 2 guy out of their, 100-man class. So he was sitting there, and you know, in between the time that he passed that selection and the time he was going to go to their, I think it's called OTC or ITC, I can't remember,
Yeah.
operator individual training course. Their course to get that individual to become a Marine Special Operations guy and get him that MLS. He hurt his back, and he was struggling with, what do I do? Do I try to go through there, and kind of suck it up, and just go through? And I was like, hey man, where do you want to be? And some of the questions that I asked, I already knew the answer, especially with this guy. I kind of knew the answers that he would give me, but I kind of just laid it out for him. I was like, where do you want to be in 10 years? You know, I was like, I know you like working out. I know you like being active. You have your kids, in 10 years, do you want to be out playing ball with them and active like that with them? Or do you want to be messed up because you push through this, hurt your back even worse, and now it's not correctable, and now you're stuck where you can't barely walk, from here to the bathroom, from here to the kitchen, in 10 years. It's like there shouldn't be any question whether you can make it in the MARSOC because you did so well during their prep course. You know, you, if that's what it is, you should be able to click that, check that box. You know, you'll be able to do that. But where do you want to be in 10 years? And then what path is going to take you to it? Going to MARSOC and, going there. And I've seen a guy, or I know of a guy that was training in Fort Bragg. Hurricane came, tore his house up. They drove him back, dropped him off at like 1800. His wife left him, took his dog and all that, and he had to deal with the house. And they're like, hey, we'll be back tomorrow night at 1800, and you're going back to training. The train doesn't stop. Your life has to be, set up and set aside. So I was saying that to say that if you get hurt, you're going to get hurt, and you could potentially damage yourself for the rest of your life. And they're just going to push you off to the side because that train's still running forward, at full speed ahead. So which path do you want to go that's going to get you to where you want to be in 10 years? And I've used that 10 years with a couple different people, and when they have do I go left or do I go right? What path do I take? Where do you see yourself, in a few years, and which one's going to get you to there better?
And where did you learn that? Because that's such a valuable way to put such life into perspective. And one, as a coach, we're often taught to do the 5 to 10 year plan because it's hard for people to think massive changes in like 1 or 2 years. But when you think about 5 to 10 years, I think this is incredible insight. And we're hearing that, I am a person that loves not me. I'm risk averse, but you mentioned that you liked like the excitement and the adventure, and
Mm-hmm.
have the grounding of, and what do I want for my life in 10 years? Do you recall where you started thinking that way? That's such profound insights.
Um, I don't know. It probably started little by little over time. Um, so like, on the list of guys, you got to stand duty at different points. Um, I remember standing duty. I think I was at 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, and I was standing duty up at the regiment. Um, and on the wall, the regimental commander, a Marine colonel, had his, how he has the priorities he has for when he's making a decision over, whatever. And it was, I'm trying to pull this out of my head now. It was like priority number one was God, because God's always there and He's constant. The next thing is family, then country, and then like the unit or something. It was 4 things, but it was kind of in that order. He's like, "Is God?" And then he explained, because God's always constant. Number two, family. Family is going to be there when you get out of the military, or in our case, the Marine Corps. Then what's best for the unit, and then and but that's how he went through his mental stuff of preparing, not necessarily all his orders, but as he thought through his leadership philosophy and how he comes up with um, different orders processes, I guess, or decision processes. He kind of uses that as a guide. And I probably took that on board, along with just other stuff along the way, and just dealing with death, throughout my time. My one buddy Ernest, we were in 1990. We we were we had just locked on as a Marine Expeditionary Unit, so our infantry unit was the ground combat element to a Marine Expeditionary Unit. We started our training, and we were on that path, becoming that unit that deploys out on ships to be the 911 response force for that area of operation. So in that, we didn't go over to Iraq for the Gulf War. They kept us on our track of, we're going to go and do our workup, get our certification, and then go on ships. And then there would be a long sustained battle, was us flying, do raids behind enemy lines to try to get the enemy to pull people off the front lines to deal with us. And in that process, my buddy showed up, halfway through our workup, and we became good friends. We did that deployment. We ended up going to northern Iraq on that deployment. The next deployment we did, he went over the sniper platoon, because I planned on getting out after my 4 years. I think everybody else knew me as a lifer, but in my mind, I was doing my 4, and I got out for Christmas, went home, and nothing really took my fancy or piqued my interest or anything at the time. So I came back, and he had gone over to the sniper platoon. Another staff sergeant from our company that we were in Iraq together with was the platoon sergeant of the sniper platoon. So I took the indoc. We went over there. We were in that sniper platoon together. We went over to Okinawa for a 6-month deployment. He and I were in the same team. Came back from that. We went to sniper school together. We went to Bridgeport, which is the Mountain Warfare Training Center, together. We also went to off the coast of Haiti together. And then that's when I got my orders to go to an anti-terrorist unit up in Norfolk. And I left the ship off the coast of Haiti to go to do that. Went up to that unit. I went to Mogadishu, came back from Mogadishu, and was at a career sergeant's course, what they call it, a career level school, when I got a call that he got killed in a helicopter crash. And it was, he died doing what he loved, but still a tragic training loss. They were 2 weeks away from coming back to the States from the end of the deployment, something that they didn't necessarily have to do, but it was just, again, always getting ready for the next thing. And, we might have to do helo casting. So that's what they were doing. They were getting in a Huey, flying off the coast right there. They were at Camp Schwab, and that was up there right on the water. They flew out. Helo cast the guys in. Guys jumped out either sides, and then they swam in. He was acting as the cast master. And they flew back in, and for whatever reason, the propeller is seized up and it's dropped out of the sky and slammed to the ground. From what I understand, the pilots' backs were messed up, but their seats did what they were supposed to. One of the other crew chiefs got messed up. Another crew chief jumped out and broke his leg, but survived. And my buddy was held in by like the gunner's belt. So it was a strap that goes around your chest and hooks to the aircraft, so you can freedom of movement in the aircraft, but you won't fall out. And when they started dropping so fast, he jumped up and hit, and then when they hit the ground, he smashed down. And all the guys that I knew from that unit said they obviously went to him first, and they were clearing brain matter out of his airway. So he had died fairly quickly, and without, I guess, much pain. It wasn't like a long drawn out thing. So that was like the first real. That was one of the firsts on the deployment that we were together in 91. A guy was sitting there, Gary Heisman. He was sleeping on the other side of a room, and a guy was messing with the machine gun, saying, "Oh yeah, it's an open bolt gun," which means the bolt is in the back. When the bolt comes forward and it hits the bullet, it shoots the bullet and then comes back and gets ready to shoot the next one. He said you can ride that bolt forward on an open bolt and it won't fire. And he fired 3 rounds to a guy that was sleeping on the other side of the room and killed him. So I guess from early on, dealing with that stuff and looking to the future, like, oh man, even training is deadly, and you just never know what can happen. So I think that's where a lot of that started. A combination of the thing when I was a sergeant out on duty, dealing with these other guys and their deaths and all that. So I think it's just a combination of just different things across the board as I was going, throughout my time. Another quick story that I always did what I thought was what I was supposed to do, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. When it came to when I was in that sniper platoon, they sent me to combat squad leader school. When I came back from that, I took that knowledge that I had and started passing that knowledge on to whoever. We were working in small teams. We were working in 4-man teams. So some of that stuff didn't necessarily apply, but other stuff did. And then when I got to that anti-terrorist unit, every morning we would have, or at least in the wintertime. So up there, we would do PT at either 06 or 1100, depending on the time of the year. In the summer, we did it at 06, and in the winter, we did it at 1100. So if it was the wintertime or whenever, in between going to chow and us having our formation, we had like 15 or 20 minutes. So I would teach. I'd say bring my squad into one of the rooms, and I would sit there and I'd teach one thing, maybe crossing a linear danger area, and talk to them how to do it. And then just every day teach them something different. And then after a while, other squad guys were like, "Hey, Sergeant Carr, can I come into when you're teaching that stuff? Yeah, more the merrier. I don't care." And then which forced their squad leaders to step up and start teaching classes. Then after a while, I started having my fire team leaders like, "Okay, Corporal, you're going to teach this class on this one subject next week, but you're not going to do that until you teach it to me first. So I'll make sure that you understand what you're going to be teaching, and you've done it before and went through." And then I had this one Marine, started out as definitely a derogatory term, and I called him the freak show because he was some kind of special. But it became eventually, after time of training him, because he went from boot camp to School of Infantry to security guard school, and then to our unit. So he was a brand new Marine. Then over time of teaching him, he became a really good Marine. Fast forward to 2009, and I was going up visiting wounded guys from my unit. So in 2009, I was at 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines. I was getting ready to go on my 3rd deployment in 3 years with them. And I got told I was getting transferred. So I did the workup all the way up until they literally got on the plane. And I gave them a high five, and they flew off to Afghanistan. And I went over to a training command. And when I started hearing that there was casualties from that unit, like right off the bat, I was going to Bethesda. I was taking like days off and going up there to visit them, and just so they can see a familiar face and see if I could do anything. And on one of those trips, I was going by, and I'm like, going to the next room. I got to go to room, whatever, 202. And I go by, and I think, I hear a voice, and I was like, that's the freak show. So I went back and looked on the board, and Staff Sergeant, Ricard, and I was like, holy, so I knocked on the door, and I get called in. I go in, and it was my buddy. His foot, he got blown up in the Humvee IED strike, and his foot was all mangled and was kind of like pins in and kind of sitting up and kind of immobilizing it. It was him, his wife. I think she was from Okinawa, and his dad. He saw me, and he kind of got choked up, and then he's like, "Hey, babe, get the f out of here!" And I was like, "Uh-oh, what did I cause?" So he kicked his wife out, and then she closed the door. And then he went on to tell his dad, like, Dad, whenever I try to do what I do, I just try to be half the Marine that this guy is. When I reenlist, it's because of him. I try to do what's right because of him. And that like blew me away. I never realized the impact I had on the Marines that I had under me and that I touched over the years, and that was just, something that, again, I was doing what I thought was, what I was always taught was right. You teach your guys, make sure your guys are prepared, and then it goes. And then how that trickled to, him doing the same thing with his guys when he became a squad leader. And then kind of going on from there. But again, all those different experiences, I think over the years kind of put together to, make who I am now.
Yeah, and I think that even that statement is when we were talking earlier, like, I think I'm just an ordinary guy. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I think there's a disconnect in just how special you are, as just being around you as a person. Like, you help everyone lift themselves up, and you bring people. It's, in a world where it was, hard, and we can talk about that transition back to civilian life, but a true leader is really leading by example and also supporting, maybe not necessarily grabbing them from behind, but supporting them wherever they are and pushing them. And that's what I see you doing always. And it's so appreciative. And I really feel grateful and honored to know you. And also, I wanted to take a moment. I know that we mentioned a lot of losses, and I'm grateful that you were able, to share those people with us. And I, certainly want to pause for them and to express gratitude for dedicating their lives to the mission to serve. I was also thinking when, we met when I was in a training program, and during that training program, my position was such that I was consulted for when paratroopers would come from their training and there would be a mishap and they could have injuries that were sometimes life-threatening. And, we always think, oh, I'm going to sign up for the military, or I'm going to sign up for medical training, and I'm going to do this. And at this point, I can retire and start to live. And I think, especially from your stories that you're sharing, it's like we need to be living while doing. And the moment we start to put life on pause, we're just going to keep pausing it. And you can certainly see our shared experiences of the losses that say, like, wait a second, like, life is fragile. We have no guarantees. And how do we live now, which, especially in our rapid-paced society, can be quite a challenge.
So, ever since, my kids were little, I would always say, goodbye, I love you. I could picture my son, on the other end on the phone, like, all right, Michael, good night, I love you. And you're like, I love you too, kind of thing. And then I told him, I think it was before he went in the Navy, I was like, Michael, do you know why I tell you I love you before we go? And he's like, because you love me. I was like, yes, because I love, but I want you to know that I love you. And if this is the last time we ever speak, I want that to be the last thing that you hear from me. And then I told him about, a variety of my different buddies that either died doing crazy, different, just different ways. And you just never know that whether tomorrow is guaranteed. So I want you to know that, so every night before I go to bed, I send both my, I walk into my daughter's room and say, "Good night, I love you." Then I come back in and I send them a text just so they have that solid thing. So if something happens to me overnight, they can wake up and they still have that last thing that I said was, "Good night, I love you," or whatever to them, just so they know, because tomorrow isn't always guaranteed. And I think my son, I mean, they both understand that. But my son was, when he was down at Charleston, he had dealt with a student that had committed suicide down there, so it kind of hit home again to him. Um, a similar way, like, man, you just don't know, what tomorrow's going to bring.
This, you're speaking to a point of what changed my whole perception on life. So when I was on call as a surgical resident, my ex-boyfriend called me because I was dealing with suicidal thoughts and depression at that time. And I had been on call for many days in a row and I was so tired. So I looked at the phone, I saw his name, I thought, I'll call him tomorrow. And I did have the opportunity to text him, and I do have his voicemail from that
Hmm.
moment because I didn't pick up. And in his voicemail, he always signs off, much love, much love. And
Hmm.
it's been, now that was 2016, and still have his voicemail and listen to that, much love. And when I didn't answer the phone call, I did text him the next morning. And this is also when my whole military career was up in shambles, and I'm thinking about me, right? About my
Hmm.
life. And it's that knowing who is really important to you. And I can't take back the fact that I didn't answer that phone call, but I felt like, wow, my priorities are so out of alignment with what truly means a lot to me, because this person meant the world to me.
Hmm.
And I no longer take call. One, because for sleeplessness, it didn't allow me to be there for that person, didn't allow me to be there for myself, and it felt to me I was risking my patients' um, appointments and their safety because of the way that affected me. And then there's that conflict in your head of like the ego and what society tells you should do, like, oh, I should just fight through that, and that grace and self-compassion. You're like, and the things that mean a lot to me, that person that I didn't answer the phone call, my patient safety, my own health. There were points in our lives where it's sometimes hard to decide. Like, saying it now, years later, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, clearly I'm going to choose the people, the patient safe,
Yeah.
and myself. But when we're in the thick of it and our brains aren't thinking very correctly, so the story with my ex is that I did text him in the morning, and then he passed away on that Sunday. And the next response I got was from his sister. And so now, anytime I'm evaluating a big life decision, or even just contemplating a struggle, it's like, is this drama worth it in my life? And I think of him, and
Hmm.
he every day shapes my thought process. And keeping his voicemail and keeping him close to heart is like my check and balance. It's like, am I doing something that I'll be proud of, to your point, 10 years?
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah. There was something else that I was thinking of that I think it's actually been since I've gotten out. One of the commandants or one of the Marine generals is like, hey, you're their leader, whether you're in that unit or not. I kind of took that to heart as well. So there's the guys that I was, in Somalia with. I still text, periodically, like, hey man, how you doing? Need anything? And there's one of the guys that was he was a designated marksman, and went on to have a good Marine career. Got out, was in law enforcement. I still checking on him and some others every so often. Again, I took that to heart. Like, okay, just they look at you as that leader from back then, even now. So, still keep on checking in on them. It was all about the veteran suicide, is what kind of brought that on. And I was like, I kind of took that to heart a lot as well. So I think that's part of what I do as a continued mission for me, at least, to make sure my guys, or, they don't even have to be my guys, just somebody that I've met along the way, kind of comes in and becomes one of my guys, you know, and I say guys as a general term, not,
Yeah.
it's also some of the females as well.
On that. And that's such a good point, because we were talking then to your transition out of the military. And I found that, you know, I was, so many things that you mentioned was like, I was ready to dedicate. I appealed to stay in. And then at some point you realize like you are replaceable. And is it like, what could I have been confident to say that what I was dealing with medically would have been right for me to fight to stay in, because I really needed a break and to rest. But it also showed me you are that number, you are sacrificing yourself, you are replaceable for the sake of the mission. And I don't regret, I think the Air Force made the right decision for me at that time. I think I definitely needed a break out of it to get healthy. But it was, I experienced a lot of grief in that transition. And I think no matter where we are in the career, we have to process that transition. So can you tell us a little bit about your transition then from the military and into civilian life and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, so I'll start with while I was still in. Well, there was one specific incident that I was like, all right, I've got like 25 or 20, 25 and a half years in. This one thing was the one straw that broke the camel's back, literally. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to put my retirement package in. But before that, I was having issues with vertigo. And I was, room spinning and all that. I mean, even to the point of me, Michael, and Laura were out at the movie theater, and something, loud noise, whatever, caused my world to spin. I went back out, tried to get some fresh air, and that didn't help. So I sat back down in the back of the movie theater, and the movie ended, and they came up and found me, like, "Where's Dad?" And they came up and found me. We went out, and they had to get in an ambulance and go to the hospital that day to help the vertigo stop. So I lead that into, at one point I was seeing an ear, nose, and throat guy at the Naval Hospital at Camp Lejeune, and he put me into this box that was completely black. I mean, I was hooked into his harness, and it was completely black, so I didn't have any visual cues. And then underneath it, it would hit the bottom of it to cause it to jolt a little bit, and then my equilibrium would have to figure out how to correct, and keep myself standing. And then in that, and the lady's like, "Oh, well, you really failed. Did the TBI clinic send you?" And I was like, "No, I'm not going to the TBI clinic. It was Dr. So-and-so at the ENT. She's like, "You need to go to the TBI clinic." And I was like, "Well, okay. Well, how do I get to there?" And she explained, like, "Hey, you got to go back to your unit's medical. They just filled this thing out, telling me you want to go get evaluated at the TBI clinic." And then she's like, "You can use my name or whatever." And I went back and I told them. And I went through the whole TBI clinic protocol, which was really good for me because it helped me with stuff right then, as well as helped me with, quality of life now that I'm out. But it also helped me with the VA, with the detailed stuff that they were doing. I mean, so they do like 5 different pillars, and don't ask me what the different pillars are. I can't remember what they all were. So you go to a specialist, 3-level high, doctor, in that specific, discipline. They're like a neuroscientist, another guy, and it was when still learning. It wasn't that level doctor. It was one that's been in that field for like 20 years, running each of those different pillars. And so I would go in and get evaluated by each one of those for that specific domain. And some of them are like, "Oh yeah, you're good," and other ones like, "Oh yeah, you're a little off. You could use this or that or the other." Even to the point when I went in to do, there was one that was dealing with my balance. I did this 15 or 20 or 25-minute test that they evaluate this and do that, and they went through and they're like, "Oh yeah, yes sir. In 10 years you're not gonna be able to stand because you're gonna be so off balance." And I was like, by the numbers, and I was like, "Uh-oh," so you can stay, and here's this sheet of paper. You can do these things every day, or you can come in here twice a week and we'll run you through them. I was like, I know me. I need to come in here because if you give me this sheet, I'll do it the first week, and then the second week I'll peter off, and then the third week I might do it once. I was like, but if you have me coming in every week, I'll come in. Yeah, this is leading somewhere. So while I was going through there, normally when I would go off to do an appointment, if I was going to go to range control or somewhere else to do something, I'm like, hey, I got an appointment, I'll be back. But when I was going to the TBI clinic, I specifically said, hey, I'm going to my appointment at the TBI clinic. And that led to two things. Others knew, like, oh, well, shoot, if the regimental gunner is going to the TBI clinic, that means PFC so-and-so, it's okay for him to go to the TBI clinic. And it also had some of my fellow gunners actually, oh, okay, take off. And I go to my appointment. And then like later on that night, a couple guys on a couple different occasions, like, hey man, can you tell me about the TBI clinic? And then I got them into it because I was open enough to explain, to tell them that I was going, and then explain it to them where they felt comfortable enough to go and get the help that they needed. So that was, I guess, the beginning of my transition. And then when it came time to, like, I put my Appendix J, as they called it, which is the retirement thing. You fill it out and you send it in. And you hope you try to get it approved. I did it for for the Marine Corps. You can do it 4 to 14 months. Under that thing, we don't necessarily need a waiver. So I pushed it out 14 months. From the time I turned it in, and they gave me a retirement date of 1 July of 2015. Which would have put me at like 27 years and like 4 days or whatever. And then from there, I just continued doing my stuff, but I also started dealing with, the VA, and it happened to be that the division gunner was getting out as well. And so we kind of stumbled through it ourselves, and like he would do this thing and like, hey, I went and talked to this lady. She's the one that helped me with my VA claim. Mm-hmm. So I went to her, and then that's who I send guys getting out on active duty here. I send all those people to her. He went to her first, and then before I went, he was like, yeah, I got a call from the Wounded Warrior Battalion. So this guy was he was in Afghanistan, and somehow hit ricocheted out and then blew out his sinus cavity. So he was in Wounded Warrior Battalion for like a year and a half. He had his jaw wired shut and stuff. So he was on their tracker, and they're like, we see you have your retirement package in. We want you to go see this lady, Cindy, because she's the one that we send all our people to. He's like, oh, well, that worked out great because I've already went, but that's the lady I went to. So when I heard that she was the one that they recommended, I got an appointment with her, and then she did phenomenal with me, and that's why I sent everybody to, and all my gunner buddies and everybody else that's here. Even I sent some of my neighbors. Now people are like 50 miles away go to see her because she was the one that did so well. So as part of that, to get ready for her appointment, I was photocopying my medical record, which is like that thick. And then I had a second one that was like that thick. I was going through one page by page, sitting right where I'm at. I got my my copier scanner sitting next to me, and I was page by page. When one was photocopying and printing that one out, I had a sheet of paper over here, and I was writing down knee. I had all the different body parts, and then I put down dates as I was going through, making a note of all the different injuries, when they were, and all that. And then when I went in there and I had that sheet of paper with me, she found more stuff that I missed. So I was sitting here page by page going through, and she caught stuff that I missed. So I guess use that as an example of how well she was and how good she is. So then I went through that whole process. But again, it was just me kind of fumbling through it. I retired. Other guys, I was like, uh-oh, something's got to be wrong, because some of my other buddies that retired about the same time had their VA stuff come back, and I was like, man, what's going on? We all retired at the same time, and they already got their decisions. That was 2 months ago. Where's mine? And then finally, it was right after Thanksgiving that I got my decision from the VA. That I was like, oh, okay, but it doesn't really matter how long it takes. You get back pay. So when that claim first, so you're not necessarily losing money, but it still was like kind of nerve wracking. Like, okay, this is kind of a big deal. So after kind of not just, that part wasn't necessarily fumbling through, but going through that whole process and not having any real guidance, you go through a week-long transition assistance program where it's more about writing a resume than it is a whole lot of other stuff.
So correct. I did that. It's very important to have your documents and always advocate for yourself and be your best resource often. And also the connections, like you said, I felt because I was sent through the MEB, I think that was very helpful for me because
Yeah.
I got structured support through that route. And it takes a little bit longer. And
Hmm.
have people as dedicated as you in order to help make sure to plug people into those resources. I think that's a great kind of transitional point to share what are you involved with right now? I know you mentioned some of how you got involved with the suicide prevention because of those meaningful experiences that you had. But can you share a little bit about the great resources that you're involved with right now?
Yeah. So people ask me what I do now. I tell them I'm a professional volunteer. So
Mm-hmm.
I do.
True.
I am the VFW post service officer for my VFW post. What that means is I help people with VA claims and any other kind of thing like hey, I need help with my VA insurance getting seen out in town, or even retired TRICARE, those things. I I do a lot because I've gone through and fumbled through the process of helping people with their combat related special compensation, especially guys doing what I used to do. I
Yeah.
help people with that specific package, even though that isn't something that my training as a service officer has helped. Here recently, the other thing I've helped is with families that there was one guy that died of medical complications, and I was helping another friend go through the death indemnity stuff for the VA so she can get money for the rest of her life, get money for the kids until they turn 18. So you got to fill forms out for that. So that's something else that I help with as well through that specific thing, that specific job. So when I say I'm the service officer, I usually tell everybody I do external to the post, and all those other guys do all the stuff that's internal, like the building and all that other stuff. So as part of that, I went to represent our post at a local. When I say local, a county veterans coalition. It's called the Veterans Coalition of the Crystal Coast. Um, and what we're chartered to do is try to prevent veteran suicide within our county, bringing awareness and training to whoever wants to kind of do it. So we're more of a connector than we are a resource or a like a we're not like providers. We're not providing any. We're providing the resource of some of these different like QPR, question, persuade, and refers, what QPR stands. So that training to others. There's Columbia is a different one. So we go through it and provide that training to. We've done it with law enforcement, EMS. We're trying to expand. We've done it to some veterans groups as well. So I'm involved in that. At this point, I'm one of the board members for training um, on that as well. Just making sure you get it all looked at and evaluated.
Yeah, and to have somebody like you that can support through that and to help navigate while making sure your point on like if you don't get help, you're risking your life, and we need to change because people are suffering in silence and it's not safe for them and life is too short.
Yeah.
And with the suffering in silence and all tied together, where do people find the resource? Is it the VFW or I love that you mentioned QPR. I find that that's often said as a great resource for training with suicide prevention. But how can they find the resources that you're mentioning?
Well, mine is specifically to my county, but I mean, there's always, I think what's it called? One source is through the military. You can go if you're active duty and you're under like TRICARE. You can go to 6 visits out in town. That specific doctor, mental health doctor, comes back with some kind of sheet. So I can see you. It doesn't work out between me and you. I can go to the next one and find the right fit for me, so that they have an option of up to 6 visits to figure out what's the right one, and then that right one can file a claim for further on visits. So that's always out there for active. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to go in to see your doctor on Monday morning if it's the weekend or whatever. So that's out there as well. And my TBI is kicking in, so
Yeah, I certainly, and I want to be mindful. I've used a lot of your time, tons of questions, but in going back to here, what things are exciting you at this point in your life?
Well, after escaping death in a bunch of wide variety of ways and things, I'm happy to be home and just you know enjoying a quiet life. Go out and do stuff with my daughter. We go to hockey games. You probably see me posting about that a lot, and just being here for them. Reading a good book. I have my routine in the morning. I get up, I feed the animals, and then I do a meditation. And meditation and or stretching/yoga, and then I do some kind of workout. Um, that's about 6 days a week, and then after that I come back, I cool down, I have a protein shake that I make, and then I usually read a little bit, and then kind of my day goes on from there. And I'm okay with that.
I love
You
that. It's
know,
so beautiful because I always say sometimes to maximize life, we have to minimize the noise. That's minimize the
mhm.
noise of societal expectations and really to be so grounded. You just warm my heart, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm really fortunate to have you as a great friend, and I really appreciate all of the life lessons and parts of your story that you shared with us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you being in my life as well.
Thank you so much.